I'm Ben, and I'm a sales guy. So I'm also incredibly interested in how to leverage data and the blend between the human and the machine, especially as it relates to sales. I run sales at RJMetrics, and we sell a platform for data consolidation and visualization to online e-commerce businesses and e-commerce and SaaS businesses. I've been there for about 3 years.
Yeah, and over 3 years, RJMetrics has grown from a small team to a very large team now, right?
Yes, it certainly has. It feels like it's been 100 years and 3 years all in blink of an eye. But I was the 20th hire, and we have grown to a full team size of a little over 100 for total of RJMetrics, and right now the sales team is about 45 people. So, and I was like the first guy on the phone making calls.
And how was the experience going from like a very small sales team where you were the first guy doing all the calls, and now you have a sales team of about 50 people, and managing all that and all the data that comes from it, and there's a lot of challenges when you're trying to get 50 people running full speed to do as much sales as possible.
Yeah, I think that the problems become different, especially as you grow and scale a team, and the opportunities to use data also become different. They become, instead of being externally focused, you kind of become internally focused on what are the behaviors and activities and sort of signals that you can both see and evaluate internally and externally to identify segments or behaviors that are better or more likely to achieve the outcomes that you want. That's sort of very meta statement, but I think simply what it becomes is instead of how many no's do I need to get to before I get to a yes? It becomes then, how many, what are the segments or what are the ways that we can set up the SDR team to leverage their time most efficiently without making them become just essentially like order takers. So there's a number of different, and we'll certainly get into it, but I think it just becomes the difference sort of between internally and externally focused, and I don't know.
I wanted to switch gears a little bit and then actually go before RJMetrics. And we had some interesting conversation before, and you were mentioning data from conversations. Right? There's so many ways to collect data. But one of the most fundamental ways is when we are doing conversations, we're collecting data. And you had very interesting experience on how you were collecting data over conversations and so forth.
Yeah, so my first real job after school, I was a ski instructor for a little bit. That doesn't count as real. I then found my way into actually as an analyst and doing sales and trading for a private equity secondary market fund. And so what we were doing was essentially facilitating trades in the private equity secondary market. So people that invest in big funds, which the fund in itself is like a big pie, and they invest in several different companies, which is oriented on a particular vertical. It could be they buy in life sciences, they buy companies or invest in companies that are in real estate, etc. And we also facilitated trades of stock in private liquid companies. So while I was there, we also there was some Facebook trades that we did across the desk, which is cool. I was initially given a script and go sit down and make calls, and I was like, all right, I don't know what I'm doing, but I can read, I think. And so I quickly transitioned into a slightly different role, which was more interesting to me, which was putting together essentially private fund and company pricing data. So basically a gigantic database of private company and private fund prices on the secondary market. So public stocks have publicly available prices of the particular unit of stock or whatever. In the private market, that doesn't exist. So you come to broker-dealers like the company that I was working for and say like, hey, I'd like to sell my share in this particular fund or company. And they're like, all right, let me see if I can figure out who would buy this. And what we were doing is taking the data from that particular conversation where our relationship managers would reach out to LPs in particular funds or big holders of private company stock, and they would have these conversations about, oh, I'd be willing to sell this at 60% of its net asset value. And so we would capture that information, plug it into a spreadsheet, and a model really that we would then apply those bids or asks for that particular fund or type of fund across a bigger segment of funds or types of private companies, and then basically put together a gigantic algorithm that could apply these prices to companies and funds that weren't actually being traded across our desk, but were similarly situated to other companies, and we were selling this type of data as a product to other financial institutions, etc. So it was interesting.
Yeah. Very cool stuff. Like collecting data, creating this product, which is just on data, just based on conversations. I've talked with a few of our competition actually, and we're trying to figure out how they are collecting data. And some of the competition was saying, we just call a lot of people and talk with them and then collect data. I mean, it's an interesting way. It's scalable to some degree. But it provides some of the data that you can't really find anywhere else. You really have to talk to people.
Yeah, I think it's about the context, right? And then trying to find a way to extrapolate the context from conversations and then apply it to other similar contextual situations. And I don't know, I was totally fascinated by this. I was also really, young in my career, and which I still am, and it was just really interesting about the blend between putting together this sort of, we were unlocking this private secondary market, which is this sort of like gray market that it has a lot of it feels cloak and dagger, and it only feels cloak and dagger because there isn't.
Data.
Yeah, because the lack of it's like I don't know how many of you or if anybody's in enterprise sales, but one of the scary things we were talking about it beforehand. Like the scary things about enterprise sales is like, yes, it's long sales cycles, but it's mainly long times without any visibility into what the hell is going on into this particular. It's like, I had this meeting. Like, well, what happened at this meeting? What did you accomplish? Like, and there isn't a lot of granular information that you can pull out of that, which is different in inside sales and faster sales cycles, etc. But it was totally fascinating to be kind of extracting that information from these ad hoc conversations that would happen across this desk.
And so here you were before, where you were extracting data from these individual conversations with people, and then you started at RJMetrics as one of those employees. And then what did you do?
Yeah, and so there's there were a couple of different jobs that I had in between those two, in which I was like, it was essentially like selling daily deals, making up 150, 200 cold calls a day. This is where I was counting up the no's to get to the yes. And you realize, like, I don't totally want to do this for very much longer. But like, more power to the cold calls. And I did well, and I was still very much interested in this particular that blend between extracting that information from. And so I took this job that I couldn't pass up. I was living in New York, and I moved to Philly for this role. and ended up at a company with RJMetrics. We sell, as I said, a platform for data consolidation and analysis. And what that means is we, in order to understand or analyze any data meaningfully, you have to be able to like get it out of the place that it is. Then you have to be able to combine it with other relevant data sources or other relevant information. So multiple data sources into one data warehouse or base. Then you have to be able to make all that data talk to each other, blend it, transform it, etc. And then from that point, when it's blended, transformed, consolidated, and moved from the individual places, you then visualize it, because visual representations of data are much more meaningful than looking at it in a table or something like that. And so that just inherently was exciting and interesting to me. Like the idea of being able to sort of expose this information from these companies was interesting. And then obviously I was sort of like excited about the idea of being able to turn that sort of light inward on the sales team.
I mean, I guess particularly at RJMetrics, with the product itself, it would be about taking a lot of data, putting it together, and doing analysis on top of it. We're probably very best suited for doing something like that, right? So, if you could talk a little bit about when you took the flashlight and put it inside the company, and then tried to say, okay, this is how we should do sales. If we really think about from the data perspective, could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So just because we have this tool that does these things does not mean that we've done it really well all the time. And so we've certainly, sometimes you take the flashlight and you go on an Easter egg hunt. You're looking for a thing, and once you find it, you're like, yes! And that becomes like confirmation to you. Other times you're sort of more independently and I don't know, really curious, and not necessarily looking for things that you know, not necessarily looking for something specific. And so I think our biggest like foibles have been in the cases in which we've gone looking for something that we wanted to find, and that typically comes in the form of like, if we can just get the CAC number, the cost of acquisition, to be this, then we're going to hire a ton of people. And then we look for different ways in which you get the cost of acquisition number to this particular way, and then once you find it, bang. But that doesn't actually expose kind of like the entirety of the situation and the other potential pitfalls that could be there. The other times that we've done this really successfully is, we ran a regression analysis one time on all of our clients that were in trial. So we do a onboarding phase, and we do some work, and then we present them with a set of dashboards, and we train them, and then they buy. That's our onboarding period. And so we ran a regression on this with our tool, and we're looking for like the biggest indicator of success during this onboarding period. And we went in without a expectation of what we wanted to find, and just sort of shine the light and let's look for the thing that comes out. And what we found, we had some hypotheses, and none of them were, I don't even remember them, they weren't right. And what we found was that the clients that created two charts, they became 89% more likely to convert than clients that did not do this act. Regardless of phone calls made or like overall engagement in the platform, logins, views, etc. But just getting them to create two charts, or people that created two charts were 89% more likely to convert. And so then what we did from there is we first tried to just call everybody and get them to build two charts. And like, that doesn't, that's not really authentic.
Selection bias?
Yeah, but it's like, oh my God, let's do that.
Did you figure out the causal relationship though?
And you can't, these are the types of things that you have to extract, the data points that you have to extract from conversations, but it's from a real understanding of how to build two charts. And like, I understand the platform enough to be able to identify something that I want to, like, here's an analysis that I want to run. Therefore, then I go into the tool and then I start to click around, I find the thing that I want, and I get to a place in which I'm happy for this, and then I save it. Like, that is representative of an understanding and being trained on the tool, willingness to invest in data and analysis to improve your business, and then a confidence in their skills, right? That they're like comfortable even saving this chart to the dashboard. So it's really it's like a sort of a abstraction on level of training. And so after we called them all and tried to get them all to build 2 charts and like show them how and hold their hand, it was really became supporting and delivering relevant content and coaching through the onboarding period that enabled them to achieve this on their own and organically, that drove our increase in trial conversions over that period.
I mean, that's very, very interesting, right? Like, you took all the data and without trying to find what you are trying to find, you just said, okay, let's try to look at the data, analyze data as it is, and let's see what bubbles up to the top that is insightful on which you could make decisions. And what you found was, okay, people who make 2 charts has 89% conversion. Now, I mean, there's a lot of chatter on data science world on, okay, we find things in data and we make insightful decisions. But as you just mentioned, this decision-making process itself is complex, right? Just calling everybody and saying, okay, make 2 charts. We found it, like 2 charts is the deal. But you found that doesn't really work. Now, going from that insight that people who build 2 charts are likely to convert, and then from the management perspective, having this decision-making process to figure out, okay, what are all the things that we need to do on the other parts of the platform to enable people to actually build 2 charts. Now, what does that decision-making process look like when you were actually doing it? I mean, we talked a little bit about it. But
yeah. So this is, okay, how to not be meta here. So the first reaction was tell all the AMs or the salespeople to call all their deals and get them to build 2 charts, which results in the type of activity that you can imagine, like not positive. If you're a buyer and your sales guy is calling you and like, hey, I want you to build 2 charts, it's like, yeah, get off me. Like, I'm trying. Like, you just had the first call yesterday. Like, relax. So I think what it is about, I really believe in this concept of explaining the why behind everything, and then that coupled with freedom within a framework. So if you do as a leader, as a sales leader, a really good job of explaining the why behind the activity or the goal that you're trying to get them to do. So we want you to get your people or your clients to build 2 charts. And then why do we want them to build 2 charts? Well, because they're 89% more likely to do it. Well, why is 2 charts really the thing that actually indicates success during a trial? It's because they have a level of training and understanding of how to use the tool and why they're buying the tool and how it will affect them. So that deep explanation of connecting the ask to the learnings that we gathered is the first set or really provides the guidepost of this framework. And then you say, and then you let your people be free, because if you start to really, which is the other thing that we found, I'm being guilty of, is then the easy thing to do as a leader is to then want to control all the activities within that framework. And say, all right, so you're gonna first, now that you understand the why, typically in this type of case, you don't do a really good job of explaining the why. You typically do more of it's because they convert more. And then here's what you're gonna do. You're gonna call them on this day, and then you're gonna deliver this set of information, which is around training. Then you're going to send them this homework, and then you're going to follow up with them on this day, and then you're gonna, you get a bunch of salespeople that are just going through the motions and not listening to their people and understanding if they are actually trained, if they actually understand why they're using this tool, or if they're actually engaged in the platform, which is the real thing that building 2 charts indicates, is an understanding and an engagement and a depth of knowledge about how this thing that you're potentially going to buy is going to affect your business. And so, you let the why explain the framework, and then you let them be free within the framework, and then, you do the cosmic follow-up for your future success. Yeah.
So by the time you were able to run experiments like the one you ran, where you found two charts were useful, you probably already had a lot of data streams put together where you could run those regression experiments, right?
Mm-hmm.
But in the very beginning, when you just started out, probably didn't have that much data, but you could foresee later on what kind of data sources and what kind of data pipelines, if you put together, would have been very useful. So I think it would be interesting if you could tell a little bit about how basically the overall data pipelines grew, and if you have any recommendations for anyone who's starting out to do data-driven sales, what kind of data pipelines and data streams they should be thinking about and making sure they're collecting it right now. Because any data that you don't collect right now, you could probably, especially time-sensitive data, you can't collect it later. So if you're trying to do data-driven sales and you are thinking of doing analysis later on, please make sure these kind of data streams and activities you are collecting very diligently and putting it together so that you could do those kinds of experiments. And you may find, in similar case, not two charts, maybe two pictures.
Yeah, right. I think you. Okay, so I think it's probably, I'd love to be able to boil it down to three, which maybe I can, but you need a marketing automation system. So if you take one step back from me giving you this answer and you're saying like, well, what are the systems that you need to consolidate? I think the step back is really, what is the journey and where does it start of the customer? And then you pick the three things that you're focused on within that journey. So, if you're a salesperson, which I assume that many of us are at least related to that particular profession, it's largely in the acquisition funnel, which is typically marketing automation plus CRM plus, and I would say not assuming that you are processing transactional data or storing it in your CRM. I would say not transactional data, and I'd substitute it with whatever product it is that you are selling or your company does. So the combination of their engagement with the first touches or the content by which you acquired them when they first became interested, then connecting that to the conversations that your salespeople have had with them, and then tying that with their engagement with your product at a later step in the sales funnel, and potentially the ones that fall. And I would really encourage the look at both the won deals and the lost deals, and not just the won deals, because if you get this terrible confirmation bias, which is not helpful either.
And just to tie that, yes and no's, and won deals and lost deals. In machine learning, if you want to train a system that does any sort of predictions, especially in supervised learning frameworks, you need a lot of these training data, which is positive samples and which are negative samples. Right? And so this is very interesting, the way you were looking at this in a similar fashion, where as you build up and try to do more and more analytics, you need to do analysis on a lot of negative examples as well. So don't forget negative examples. And make sure you also store all the activities around negative examples, so that later on, when you're trying to figure out, okay, what not to do, you have all these pointers on, okay, these are the activities that led to no. And there are many of these, and there are some patterns around it. So let me figure out the pattern and try to reallocate resources so you don't end up doing it.
Yeah, and this isn't to say either to like, I have lots of hunches, and you will, I'm sure, have these, and that's not a bad thing. But I think that I'm really okay with being wrong about lots of things, and I'm often wrong. But that blend together is really useful, and I think that it's not one of those things that comes easily. This sounds like me pontificating about how awesome I am. I'm not, and I don't mean to say that at all. It just comes from being wrong often enough that if you, the assumptions help guide where to start, but I would say take small chunks, look for the negatives, and run different experiments on a regular, ongoing basis. Yeah.
So, talking about wrongs, over the course of many years that you're running the sales team at RJMetrics, what would you say one of the big wrongs that you may have done, and then you look back and realize, well, if I had maybe had more data or done better analysis of data, maybe I could have not made that mistake?
Yeah. There are several that come to mind. I think one that has, so this isn't actually one that is like, if we just had more data, it was the fact that we had a ton of data. So when I first went to RJ, I was like tasked with figure out how to create outbound. I was like, all right. I made some cold calls before, and so whatever. So day one, I'm out to lunch with the CEO, who's like a very technical founder, brilliant guy, and we're at Elbez in Philly. If you've ever been there, it's great. And he's like, so how are you going to do outbound? So like, here's how I did outbound. And so I just started to tell him like what my process was, which at first he was not particularly interested in. But basically, it's like you go to Google and it's like, okay, go call a bunch of companies. Well, what are you going to call? So I said skiing e-commerce companies. Great. So like put in skiing e-commerce, and I'm going for a goal of 50 or something. So you look at the website, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, fill up a spreadsheet of 50 companies. Then take all those companies and go look for buyers at LinkedIn. People in decision-making power that typically this might be a fit for in the ideal customer profile sense. And as I kept kind of like going down this pattern of like what I would look for the defined fit, he sort of stopped paying attention to me after paying attention intently and was like kind of in the matrix. And it's like, still. And out of that meeting came what we have now had for the last 3 years, which is called Olga. Olga is both a wonderful, beautiful machine and a really, cantankerous thing that we have, which is Olga stands for Outbound Lead Generation Application. And what we essentially did was create a model, an algorithm that we could feed a bunch of data and would essentially evaluate companies just as I was evaluating them in my one-to-one, look at the website, decide whether it's a fit, then look for people and find their email address and decide whether or not they were good likely fits or buyers or decision makers, whatever you want to use. And we fed Olga the Alexa top 1 million. So, 1 million companies, e-commerce companies, and basically like Olga would basically apply a qualified or not qualified in a binary way to these different companies. And so it would apply a score based on certain parameters, like does it have a shopping cart, does it have people on LinkedIn, how big is the company, etc. Does it have porn words, negative 10 points, like does it have a shopping cart, plus 10, So, and then we came back with like, holy shit, 50,000 companies. Let's email them all. And so we turned Olga into a email service provider of sorts, where we just essentially like built out a thing that would automate drips or drip emails to these companies, and we were like, well, we got a bunch of salespeople, like let's just feed Olga with all of these qualified companies, email 50,000 companies and a bunch of people at them, and then let's let the salespeople field inbound responses, which like for the outbound guy sounds like the greatest thing you've ever heard of. This will work great. We over the total lifetime, we got one closed deal from Olga. 50,000 companies. These are not people either. So that was and there were some great names of these like different teams within this particular initiative. We set up, so Olga was like the I don't know, technology that was backing this. And then they were supporting what was called the War Room, which was a combo of SDRs and marketing people. And the particular tactic that the War Room was employing was the boil the ocean tactic, which was the send 50,000 companies emails about RJMetrics and let's see how many. And all of this failed dramatically. Not only did we only get like one closed deal and a ton of wasted time, but you can imagine, I'm positive we've emailed some of your companies in this room. And I mean, you can imagine it's not like the most value delivering email ever. It's not particularly customized. It's not, because we're taking big cuts at this 50,000 thing. And so ultimately, that made us rethink the strategy.
So 1 million companies boil down to 50,000 and one deal.
Yep.
So if you were to now, I know a lot, what went wrong?
So a couple of things went wrong. The first mistake was not testing. Has anybody read Crossing the Chasm? No? Yeah. So old book, sorry, not old. It has been around and went through kind of this like up and down bit of a popularity, and has recently sort of come back up. It's great. It talks about how to break into different markets, and the basic thing is, you go in really small, narrow, and then you land and expand. In markets, not just companies, but sure, it works in companies too. We didn't do that. We just tried to capture the entire market, email everybody, and with some generic message. And what that did was prevent us from learning anything from it. So we weren't able to try it with a small subset and like what worked, what didn't. What were the assumptions that we had, and how are they right or wrong? And then try that on the next group. We essentially just came up with something and then scorched 50,000 leads. So that was number one. Number two was we didn't consider the blend between the human and the machine. And we just essentially, and by we, I really mean me. I thought that this was going to be the greatest thing ever, and that we're going to turn outbound salespeople into inbound salespeople, and who wouldn't want this? And so just make them order takers. They don't need any ability to be creative in the sales process or like consider whether or not this person should get that type of note or this type of custom messaging. We just made them sort of cogs in a wheel. And that sucks, both, internally and externally. And I think that those are like top two things that why you don't do that.
Yeah, and this could be, I think there are more and more outreach cadence programs out there, and I think there's more and more companies buying this list, like giant lists, right? 10,000 companies, 15,000 companies, and sending one mass email and just saying, okay, we're going to do a 4-step cadence, and I'm going to send to 15,000 on step 1, and then whoever do not respond, which is probably most of them, I'm going to send another email, and then keep on doing that, right? So I guess this is a great insight where you can't just do that and expect, do a simple math saying, well, I closed I sent out to 100 very personal emails, and I was able to close 10, so I have a 10% close rate. So let me do 7 to 15,000. I'm gonna get 1,500.
Yeah.
Right. And
that was the math that we were doing, though.
Oh, okay.
Because it's so hard not to do that.
But think of how much worse off you would have been if you quickly gotten 25 closed sales you would have thought, we wrote the code, let's just keep doing this.
Yeah, I think you're right. Although I don't think we would have gotten 25. And I think the method by which we would have gotten those would have been markedly different because it would have represented an evolution from, version 1.0 to whatever version that allowed us to get to 25.
What did you do?
Well, we stopped doing that. First order of business. So what we did was, one, I really believe in the 5 whys kind of methodology. You take a step back, like, why didn't this work? Well, it didn't work because of this thing. Why didn't that work? Well, it didn't work because you take it, you explain the why, essentially you force yourself to go through this process. And the outcome of this is that what we should have done better was narrow and segment in a way that we weren't even using the word segment to mean 20 companies, and get a group of people and say, these are your 20 companies, find a way to make them. And here's why they're the top 20 companies, and let's see what we can do in this period of time, and then create a system that allows us to learn from that. So basically what we did was shift to a account-based marketing strategy where we have identify a top 500 companies that we're only really allowing we're sort of titrating them out to our people and giving them the access to tools like Olga and tools like RJMetrics and the insights that come from our platform and just the tons of data that we have, and giving them the ability to manipulate the levers on the machine so that the blend between the humans and the machine is tight, as opposed to sort of passive. So they're saying, here are the top 10 or top 20 companies that I want to reach out to within this 500 person list. And here's why I want to reach out to them, and here's what I'm going to reach out to them with, and here's why I think that RJMetrics is a compelling solution for them, and then here's my plan for that. And that system, not only does it work better, but it creates this, I think this internal culture that is so important in sales. It can go up and down. When there's buy-in, there's nothing that can stop it that can stop you. It can stand in your way. When there's commitment and hustle and high-fiving and good music, all of that is good, but you can't manufacture that without real commitment. And the giving the people on the front lines the access to the information that drive their own decisions is a great way to foster an environment of commitment and people that care. And that are knowledgeable and care at the same time.
So basically, drilling down in each company way more, essentially collecting more data to figure out the answers to those 5 whys, and really digging it deeper, and then using all that answers that you gather, some of which might be qualitative based on the creative ways you might be able to find answers to those questions, and then only reach out to them after you know a lot about each company.
Yeah, you're looking for hand-raising events or signals that indicate likelihood to buy and engagement and trying to deliver value at every.
Exactly. So, data-driven sales doesn't necessarily mean collect 1 million and send it to 1,000, right?
It means the opposite.
It's actually figuring out every possible data point in each company, and then actually running experiments, right? Running these small mini experiments after collecting data, and do experiment in a small batch of 100 or 150 with similar cohorts of clients, and then learn from them, and then based on that, based on that data collection, keep on improving.
So you sent out a lot of emails, right? How did you figure out if it was the companies that you were reaching out to, or was it a specific person and their title, and being that at every company, a title can be worth nothing depending on what it is. So how did you analyze, what that metric and what you should be using?
Yeah, so that was the first question that we asked, and so we were like, let's just send it to a different title. And so we tested it. It was a lot of that's a kind of looking for it. It couldn't be the overall strategy. It must be maybe deliverability was the issue, or maybe the person didn't have decision-making power, or maybe our content wasn't relevant to this particular persona, or all of those different types of questions. And the real answer to that came not from those experiments on the big, broad scale, but on the more finite scale. And we were able to answer that very question, although we tried to email different people with the $50,000 sort of mail, but the real answer to that comes when you take it down to a smaller group and you can really deeply understand why this isn't working and what would work better.
So as you mentioned, now collect all this data at the level, at the depth of each account, collect why and so forth, and use various tools on top of it. I think quite a few people here would be interested on the tools aspect as well. That is, okay, now I've figured out all the data, I've collected that, I've answered all 5 questions, 5 level questions. Now, in RJMetrics, what kind of tools are you using to enable you to do things based on the data? And what does the technology stack look like, for example, that some of the other companies that are trying to do something like what you're doing should look at?
Yeah, so we don't use a ton of different tools, to be totally honest. We've tried lots of different ones, but I think that if you add too many, it gets complex. The tools that we use are Salesforce. We use Outreach.io, which automates drip emails. We use Mattermark, a competitor, which is DataFox, and I love DataFox, but we use Mattermark. Doesn't matter. Which is essentially it's a tool that's positioned, or these tools were, that tool specifically was originally positioned for investors or VCs to do research on private companies and determine make investment decisions. But it works really well for sales, B2B sales, because you're identifying, it's a place to identify signals and kind of trends and compare and do the whole rabbit hole thing where this company is similar to these other companies, etc. And I think those 3 things are completely sufficient. And the reason why is the one other component that I think is a tool that we use, but is not something that you need to buy, is just information. And meet with your people and talk to them. You need way fewer than you think you do, human beings, to be really effective. And if you've got 10 or so people that are split across 2 different teams, maybe an SDR and an AE team, especially in the early stages, and you just explain to them what the market is that we're going to do and the general what a buyer looks like and why, but not that it can only fit this mold, but here's why this person is a good persona and here's why this company is a good fit. Then you give them Salesforce and teach them how to run their own reports. You give them Mattermark to teach them how to find other companies that are similar to them. And you give them something like Outreach.io, which automates the shitty part of sales, which is the follow-up emails. You're then freeing up their time to make creative, independent decisions about the markets and the people and the companies and the people at those companies that they can go attack. And they're bought in. That does it.
Cool. Anything you guys use for phone calls? Or don't do a lot of cold calls and focus a lot on?
Oh no, we do cold calls. Team. Everybody hates cold calls. I think the thing to do is what we do with cold calls is have good marketing forums where you can capture that information. And there's also we don't have I don't really believe in the whole list buying thing. I think it creates more sort of dependency on outside and gives reps parachutes as opposed to like tools to go find stuff. So like if the number's not there, it's like I call the number, it's not there. It's like, well, you know, like go look for one. You know, call the phone tree, do something. Like, so I'm more interested in that. And one thing about the phone though that we do is we record all the phone calls. And this is, you know, one of the things that you gotta like check your local, state, and federal laws and whether or not you comply with this. You probably will. You can't use them for holding people accountable to contracts or things that they said on the phone, but you can use it for internal training purposes. That using it for internal training purposes is one of the like biggest game changers ever. And that's again about information and connecting it. Like, here's why that didn't work. You know, here's what you can do to make it better. And like get everybody involved. Group call recording sessions are huge where they're giving each other feedback. It's really strong.
That's collecting data on phone calls.
Yeah.
And analyzing. So that was a very good session. I think it's time to open up for questions from the audience.
Everyone, when you're a startup, you're constantly learning and trying things and experimenting. I'm curious, how you guys internally structured like when to step back and when to reevaluate experiments. So like, did you set like weekly check-ins every Wednesday with the CEO to evaluate things, or was it just like every day? How did you structure that?
I think at the outset of those things help, but they also can get really useless quickly. Especially if it's just another one of those sort of like meetings where people just show up to and like aren't thinking about it in a way that is, I need to use this as a way to, I don't know, drive change. I think it comes at the outset of any initiative that you run and being really specific. There's like a 1 minute, set SMART goals. SMART stands for something, and it's like specific, measurable,
Action.
attainable, I think is that, and then there's a timeline. And that timeline and measurable and specific will force you to check in, and I would say check in, don't just wait till the end, right? Like you want to see pacing. Sales is all about pacing, and if you're doing any like sales initiative, you should be pacing to that goal because you ain't gonna make it up in the last 30 seconds of the race.
First of all, I'm surprised that this team is so effective because you never take a phone call and it's more and more interrupted. And it's I'm curious for two things. How much of your business actually grows from is the trading portion, and what are the how do you explain the 5 whys of why your phone still works? Which extent does it work and why?
Yeah. So it's actually a growing portion of the business as opposed to shrinking. And I, like you, when I first went there, I was like, we're not gonna make any phone calls. And like, because that sounds great. Except for ones that are like set up meetings or something like that. But the challenge is that everybody is doing that, and the thing about sales is you gotta be where other people aren't. And find unique ways to stand out. And one of them at this present moment in this particular market is that people think cold calling is dead. You see a blog post, 7 reasons why cold calling every 5 minutes. And like just the sheer nature of that means that it's not. And that you should probably make more cold calls. But there's a component that like the evolution went from cold call heavy to only send outbound emails, and now everybody, how many outbound cold emails did you get today? Like, probably more than 5. And you probably deleted all of them. And why? Because it's not targeted and kind of useless and isn't a place where you're actually really looking for value or think that value is delivered to you. But in that time where cold calls went down and marketing emails went up, was this like resurgence of content marketing, which is all about delivering value and creating like a relationship with the brand and the potential prospect of it. And since that point, there is a way to continue to deliver value via the phone, which is where a place there people aren't, where your competitors aren't, and you just have to be smart about that. Have I figured it out? No, but cold calling is a way to stand out from the rest of the crowd, and I would suggest it not be a way you don't make a cold call to the person to totally start the conversation from ground zero. You probably sent them a few emails, and you find their phone number and you say, hey, I'm calling you about this, the emails that I sent you, because you look similar to many of our best customers, and, did I catch you at a bad time? Yes. Okay, I'll call you back later. I was just about to go. No. All right, well, it sounds like you're busy. Let me give you like a 30-second commercial. We can figure out if it makes sense for us to talk again later. And so hands off, I'm not trying to like pitch it really quickly and then get out the door and maybe make a decision. It's about like starting that relationship and then using that as an impetus to deliver more value, and then let that sales or let the prospect kind of indicate to you when they're ready to talk. But I think to answer your question more simply, it's a growing part of our business because it's a place where our competitors aren't.
A lot of talk about data in conversations. But as we know, collecting a lot of data can be very time intensive for your sales reps and could reduce productivity. Can you talk a little bit about how you found the balance of finding what data was important and how you collect that? So you found that right balance that would reduce productivity?
Those account pages can grow so quickly in Salesforce, and like you're filling out, and it's like, what? I think know that it's not going to be perfect, and there's no simple perfect answer. I think you probably the way that I did it was I put a recurring calendar invite on my calendar every month to say, are there too many fucking fields in Salesforce right now? And just take a look at it and decide what's real and what isn't. And I think the way to think about it too, and how to make that decision is think about the regression that we talked about at the beginning. Like, what are the indicators of success in a sales cycle? And then the next layer of question is like, okay, well, this field is actually an indicator of success. And you're saying, how's it being? And the next question is like, how is it being used currently? And if both of those questions are sort of like meh answers, like, yeah, this sort of is an indicator of success, and like, it's not really being used currently, get rid of it. And also, if somebody's really using it, they'll tell you after you get rid of it, and you can always bring it back. You can just hide the field.
Any more questions?
Just one more. So I'm doing the business one of the companies we sell data-driven approaches to sales managers. And what I'm finding is just online. It's that it very much depends on the profile of the person. So some sales managers are data-driven, and it's super interesting when you take, and others, and everybody that RJMetrics is the same, where the manager, as we cover site, is super data-driven, it's going to react or not, but you can't know ahead of time. So is that what you experience, that it's the case, it's more personality thing than anything, that first thing, and be able to identify that?
Yeah, so I think this is yes, it is largely about, there's some level of personality, but then there are also indicators of those personality traits based on signals that you can cull from products and services that they're using. So for example, it's likely that a data-driven sales manager is going to be more likely to use outreach than one that's not. Maybe that's the step. Right. So then you would look for signals of people that have recently bought outreach, or have that app installed. Most of these things you can see. I don't know if outreach is actually one of them, but yeah, I think you had a good answer when we were talking on the training. You were talking about there's the recency.
We don't have as large as a sales team like you do right now. But the things that we're trying to do to make it very data-driven is figuring out signals. That is any kind of signal that we can use from the web, from public data sources, not just to find who and what company to contact, but is this the right time to contact them? And that's a very hard signal to find. So essentially what you might end up having to do is collect a lot of very weak signals from social media, from job posts and whatnot, combine them, and to come up with a very cohesive signal to say, okay, this is the right person to contact. And as you grow a sales team, you probably want more and more people to do that within the company.
Yeah. And I think okay, so there's lots of signals, so where do I start? I think if you have, let's say you have 3 people that are talking to customers on a semi-regular basis, I think it starts with saying to those 3 people, hey, we're trying to figure out some signals that indicate whether or not this person is likely to buy. And so can you, when you're talking to them, think about all the things that say, yes, this person gave me this signal, and also all of the no's that they give me this signal that they're not ready to buy because of X, Y, Z. And then record, say you're going to set a goal, I'm going to do this for 50 phone conversations, and I'm going to come up with these things, and which ones come up most? And then see if you can figure that out from a automated basis, looking at 50,000.
That takes me to my follow-up question, which is, do you try to replace all that with a market with more suspicion, so the stories like Eater or something, try to do that?
Yeah, we just built it in Olga, and it sort of doesn't work all that great. But we've also had Olga is now so intertwined with the rest of our business, it essentially underpins. It passes events back and forth. We use it to support pulling data out of Salesforce and then moving it back. So those things are important. The ability to tune them appropriately without a bunch of code and without people getting the people that are writing the code getting pissed at the people that want to make the adjustments is an important thing to think about. And if I had to do it all over again, I would probably just buy something rather than build. Infer looks interesting to me.
Have you ever tried it?
We have not tried it. I've talked to their product manager and I'm considering trying it, but it's a little sort of blasphemous since we built Olga, but who cares?
I think we have time for one
more. As you guys have scaled the sales team, how have you segmented the outbound by size of deals versus different sectors, and how have you incorporated data into testing some of that?
Yeah. So we've done it, I think, largely from the way in which we actually, the drivers of price. And to be honest, the outbound team, for our deal size and structure, there isn't really a meaningful segmentation into what we're looking for. What I would suggest, though, in terms of just general segmentation and I think most people often feel like we got to go up market and we gotta sell enterprise deals because they're bigger. My suggestion is you probably can't say that that's true until you have maybe 500 to 1,000 customers, depending on what your ASP is and what that sales cycle looks like, and that you should be sure about what that means going enterprise, and then you should look at enterprise and then define one tiny little segment, enterprise skiing companies, whatever. And then go try to see how many you can close there, and then let that be the experiment that says okay, maybe I'll try the next segment over, as opposed to just segmenting and then giving some, 2 kids a task to go try to close a bunch of enterprise deals.
Sounds good. I think that ends our session here. That was a very good session. Thank you.